Live from SABC studios in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. Welcome to this midweek edition of the Watchdog. My name is Vuyo Mvogo, and here's what we have for you this evening.
Where we are now, we're almost in danger zone in as far as energy generation is, and we've got to solve it.
Broken promises, struggles South Africans have to endure when politicians and state agencies don't fulfill promises. And the powers that be then get surprised when people are furious. Tonight we remind you of President Cyril Ramaphosa's electricity promises and of how the NPA has been stringing families of our struggle heroes along. We also look at the country's alcohol problem and how it's affecting the lives of our teenage population. And British MPs forced Lindiwe Sisulu to clarify her comments on the South African judiciary. All that and more in tonight's episode of The Watchdog, which starts right now. We start with the load shedding issues. Eskom announcing today that the maintenance backlog will take days to weeks to clear. In a statement released earlier today, the power utility said the system will remain constrained and vulnerable to additional breakdowns while recovery activities are in progress. Eskom repeated Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan's comments that the crisis was brought about by striking workers.
Eskom says some workers are still absent from work in some power stations, but the protest actions have subsided. It says there's been an incident of violence where an Eskom employee's house was petrol-bombed in Letabo area. Eskom has blamed the unions for not condemning the actions of the workers who are participating in an illegal strike.
The disruptions are still continuing at least one power station, that's Mata, where the workers are still gathering outside and protesting. In other power stations, yes, the absenteeism still continues. Not all of the workers have returned, but certainly maintenance has improved and operations have improved.
NUM and NUMSA says that the Eskom wage negotiations have been able to break new ground with a new offer that will be tabled at the Central Bargaining Forum on Friday. They've called on their members to give the process of negotiations a chance and says they will also be presenting the new offer to their members.
Given the fact that Eskom has finally agreed to return to the negotiating table and there is a new offer which will be formally presented on Friday in the CBF, NUMSA and NUM leadership are calling on our members at Eskom to give the process of negotiations a chance.
The unions have urged their members to normalize the situation and return to work, given the fact that Eskom has returned to the negotiation table. Now the ball is in the court of Eskom's workers, who have to decide whether to accept or reject the new offer. Naledi Matlapeng, SABC News, Johannesburg.
We do, of course, understand that the crisis was discussed at today's cabinet meeting. We'll see what comes out of that. But political parties, unionists, and energy analysts seem to united, in fact, in their outrage at what seems to be excuses and broken and smoke screens. The Democratic Alliance, no friends of trade unions, is among those who have taken exception to the Public Enterprises Minister conveniently pinning load shedding on striking Eskom workers. Take a listen to what some political parties had to say today in response to the minister's characterization of the problems at Eskom.
As the country continues to be in the dark, more and more people are uncertain whether or not the challenges facing Eskom will ever be ironed out for the benefit of South Africans. The power utility has implemented stage 6 of load shedding across the country for the first time since 2019. But the question is, when will the issue of energy be sorted out for the economy to grow and thrive?
It is an embarrassment, but this is not the only country that had a blackout. Many countries, even in Europe, had a blackout, but ours, it became very glaring because these are challenges on Eskom. They've been there, but we seem to be moving very slow to address those challenges. But I think government must try to make a priority of priorities that the issue of electricity also contributes to economic growth.
Political parties are not happy with the continuing situation in the country.
We are slowly becoming another failed African state because people are actually loyal to their own factions than to be loyal to South Africa. We don't understand why the CEO of Eskom is still the CEO after he has taken us through this difficult situation.
Stage 6 load shedding is totally disgusting. It is very clear that the ANC government has collapsed Eskom. There's nothing left of Eskom. Many people are going to lose their jobs because it is an economic sabotage.
Some parties say this calls for a national state of disaster in South Africa.
It is clear that we are in a crisis. It is clear that South Africa is faced with yet another national disaster. We are therefore, as the National Freedom Party, calling on the President to establish an inquiry that is going to investigate the contributing factors to these blackouts.
Now we are in stage 6 load shedding. Had we addressed this in advance, we would not be here. But now that we are here, we need to be both proactive and reactive. Pravin Gordhan and the ANC government is neither. We need to move fast on this, and we need to hold these people to account. More than holding them to account, we need to put urgent things in place.
Now, President Cyril Ramaphosa is out of the country and was attending the G7 meeting in Germany. It remains to be seen if he will heed the call by political parties to take drastic action on the issue of load shedding in South Africa. Abongile Dumako, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Now, many of you may remember President Cyril Ramaphosa promising 2 years ago that government would do all it can to ensure load shedding didn't worsen. Well, it has. As Nhlanhla Kgatlana reminds us, in 2019, President Cyril Ramaphosa cut short his trip abroad, returned to the country to deal with the crisis that was brought about by the first declaration of stage 6 load shedding.
Where we are now, we're almost in danger zone in as far as energy generation is, and we've got to solve it.
Promise after promise, but the struggle to contain power cuts persists. Begging the question, will there be any light at the end of this very dark tunnel? The struggle to contain power cuts persists as South Africa yet again finds itself at stage 6 load shedding. In December 2019, the president had to cut short his bilateral trip to Egypt due to the emergence of stage 6 load shedding.
On our journey, we got to hear that the country had gone into stage 6 of load shedding, and that surprised and shocked us. And I immediately felt that it was necessary that I should cut my visit short and return to the country.
Weighing in on the matter, political analyst Thamsanqa Malinga says, amongst others, this electricity crisis goes into the broad discourse of failing policies and empty promises when it comes to service delivery.
Every 5 years goes on and promises people that we will give you free services, we will give you this and that.
Meanwhile, with load shedding apparently not going away, South Africans have to accept the reality of maneuvering around power cuts to continue with their lives. Nhlanhla Kgatlana, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Broken promises, a common theme the stories we're pursuing this evening have. Up next, how the National Prosecuting Authority has been stringing families of apartheid victims along, promising to do something about what came, the things that came out of the TRC and other apartheid atrocities. That conversation coming up next. Welcome back. Well, despite promises that's going to happen, there's very little evidence that there's been any real movement. Families, human rights activists have been waiting with bated breath for the NPA to begin prosecutions of Truth and Reconciliation Commission matters and other apartheid crimes. My guests for this conversation are Tembi Nkadimeng, whose sister, Noktula Smelane, was an Mkondo Wesizwe operative. Imtiaz Kaji is the nephew of Ahmed Timol, an activist who was murdered by the apartheid regime. And on the line, we have Hanif Valley, who is the executive director of the Foundation for Human Rights, who also served in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Good evening to all of you. Thanks very much for being part of this conversation.
Thank you. Good evening to all viewers as well.
Imtiaz, I remember during the inquest, many of the families were there, the Biko family and several others. And every now and again during breaks and, there were these conversations, about what on earth was going on and why it has taken so long. And even after conversations and people at least pretended or said, they understood what was going on, they understood your US families' frustrations, but also that this is something that needed to be done, but there was still no movement, and that's where the mystery was.
No, most certainly, Vuyo. I mean, if we just look at the timeline of the last 5 years, this week marks 5 years when the Ahmed Timol inquest reopened on the 26th of June 2017. Let's just look at the timeline of the last 5 years, Vuyo, and then we can get a picture of what is unfolding. Judge Billy Motley issues the verdict 12th of October 2017, reversing the 72 inquest finding from suicide to murder, clearly stating that João Rodrigues must be investigated for his role in the murder of my beloved uncle. For 6 months, the docket moves up and down from the NPA offices to Gauteng South office. Then the DPP in Gauteng South, Andrew Tauke, gets hold of the docket, assembles the team in 3 months, conducts the investigation. 30th of July 2018, Vuyo, João Rodrigues is charged. For a period of 3 years, 19 court appearances, all postponed. Rodrigues' legal counsel, that is paid by you and I as taxpayers, 3 legal representatives, Vuyo, 2 senior counsel, then bring in a 342A application requesting for the charges against the client to be dismissed. May 2019, the application is heard at the full bench of the South Gauteng High Court. It then gets dismissed. November 2020, it gets heard at the Supreme Court of Appeal in Bloemfontein. And in June 2021, the Supreme Court of Appeal dismisses the application. September the 7th, Rodrigues passes on. Now, what were the issues that were raised in the 342A application? I think that is the crux of where we are sitting, Vuyo. There is a number of issues. Firstly, Rodrigues was interviewed by the TRC prosecutor at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission hearings in 1996, but he was not subpoenaed to testify. In 2003, I write to the NPA, providing them with evidence to say that this matter must be investigated further. Rodrigues' legal counsel raises the question, why was this not pursued? They then asked the question that so many years have passed and lapsed. Everybody else in the Timor matter has passed on. We are victimizing João Rodrigues. They then claim that he would not get a fair trial. His rights would be infringed in terms of the Constitution. This is our internationally heralded Constitution. And let us remind ourselves the preamble of that Constitution for you. I quote, "We the people of South Africa remember the injustices of the past, and we honor those who suffered and sacrificed for our land," unquote. And an apartheid-era police officer, legal counsel uses the same Constitution to say he will not be given a fair trial. Then they raise a question. They talk of a secret amnesty deal. Parallel to the TRC process, they talk of an agreement, and based on that agreement, João Rodrigues must not be charged. Now, the full bench dismisses the application. The Supreme Court of Appeal dismisses the application. And in addition, they are scathing on the conduct of the NPA, because two senior prosecutors in the NPA deposed affidavits where they are now stating that there was political interference that prevented them from doing its work. And the full bench tells the NDPP, take action against the two of them. And there's no evidence of any action taken against them. Now, due to the lengthy time delay, the matter does not get heard at the apex court in the country. But as soon as Rodrigues passes on, Rodrigues' legal counsel appeals to the Concord that this matter is of national interest. It represents all apartheid-era police officers. You need to hear this matter. And the apex court dismisses it, simply stating that Rodrigues has passed on, and the matter ends there. Now, if this is not deliberate on the part of the judiciary for dragging and delaying its feet, and under their watch, under an ANC-led government, Rodrigues got off scot-free by passing in September 2021.
Tembi, what for you? Have you been able? What is your sense, of why this has taken so long? And
well, it's lack of commitment from the NPA, but as Mtias said, we now know. In fact, the affidavit is speaking about, it was a court matter of Nokuthula against the state, the NPA, where Vusi Pikoli and Raymond Ackerman deposited those affidavits to say, hey, you can blame us all you want, Tembi, but we wanted to do one of those matters, which is what is included in the files, and we couldn't do it.
There was interference.
Precisely because there was interference. So, to me, it indicates that there's a deal that was struck somewhere. Unfortunately, for us, we were not party to the deal. And that doesn't help our situation, because all what we want is closure. All what we want is the truth. Am I expecting to see Nokuthula alive today? I'll be mad, possibly. But all I want is for Kutie to say to me, here is the river where I threw her, if she threw in the river. Those they killed after her, they burnt her alive to ashes. We burnt her and we were sitting under a tree there, frying meat and having. And I go and perform my rituals and I close the matter, because that's what is remaining for us. But the situation is as they will die even with that truth. I said to the NPA when they were postponing the case that Kuzie is saying now I have got mental illness or whatever that it is, the medical report, that it's part of another delay tactic. Now he must be investigated if he's sick. He was attending court. He went for a consultation on a Friday when he's coming to court on a Monday, and it's a long-standing illness. You can see it's a game. But it's also a money-making scheme, and this country must know that if we pursue for justice, it's not on our favor, actually. How much was paid in the case of Rodrigues? Nokuthula's appearance is over 3 million in legal fees of the tax that South Africans are paying, that have been paid to the legal representative to play this game at the expense of the justice that we want. So I think, really, those who made the deal, maybe they must come forth, talk to us, explain what was in the interest of the deal, and we try to find one another, and we get the truth. Because that's the interest of what we want.
Hanif, do you think there'll be value in those who may have been part of this secret deal that no one seems to know much, if anything, about coming forward and perhaps explaining what actually happened. And maybe that would begin to, unlock some of or at least clarify some of the mysteries.
Oh, absolutely. But, I don't believe they will do it voluntarily. We have been pushing with the families and with previous TRC commissioners for the president to set up a judicial commission of inquiry to look into this. We've written to him in 2019, he ignored us. We wrote to him 3 times in 2019, he didn't respond to us. In 2020, we wrote to him, he didn't respond to us. We interacted with the ANC in the top hierarchy of the leadership in 2021 to no avail. We've got a legal opinion to say that we would be successful in compelling the president to establish a commission of inquiry. We've sent the president a letter of demand putting him on terms in 2021. We were told through a public lecture by the Minister of Justice in November 2021 that he'll appoint a judge to inquire into the suppression of cases by the NPA. But this is an appointment of a judge within the NPA structures. This is not a judge who's part of the Commission of Inquiry. He's not invoking the Commissions Act. And we have problems with this. We have problems with this because it may be behind closed doors. We have problems with this because does he have the power of subpoena? What are his terms of reference, etc.? So we believe the only way to get to the bottom of this, and these are very serious allegations made by, for example, judges of the High Court, judges of the Supreme Court of Appeal, to say that there was political interference, and we believe that the matters of sufficient import for this country that there should be a formal judicial commission of inquiry looking into this issue.
Now, a year ago, last week, don't know if that's correct English, I was, on the program, we had Advocate McAdam, who the NPA at the time was saying they are on these cases now. They're going to move with speed. And I wanted to take a listen to what he said, because this is what in part gave rise to this conversation this evening about promises people made, but they never deliver on those promises. It was exactly a year ago, and he said there was a great deal of movement. This is how he described it.
Vuyo, the first thing we must appreciate on the TRC cases, they're not current crimes where, the crimes reported today, within 2 days the police can arrest and a suspect will be in court, and very quickly in the High Court where there'll be a trial. A lot of work has to go into these matters to building them. But I am sure that if contact is had with the various persons who've approached the DPCI or the NPA to ask us to look into these 53 cases, they will confirm that they are receiving updates from the investigators who are dealing with those investigations. Where appropriate, the prosecutors also have meetings with the families and their lawyers. But the 53 cases is only part of the news. The country went into a severe lockdown in 2020. Now, what happened is that did slow down investigations where one has to travel throughout the country looking for witnesses. A lot of the archives where evidence was stored were closed for serious periods. Investigators also lost their lives from COVID, driving and contracting COVID while traveling and succumbing to the disease. But in that same period, an audit was done of each and every death in detention. The earliest case was 1963. The most recent reported case was 1990. And those remaining cases, which were not under investigation, were earmarked for investigation. In addition, because of the public statements made by the National Director, members of the public started taking the NPA into its confidence, writing to us, asking us to look into their cases. So now we have identified currently, and our numbers are increasing on an ongoing basis. We're looking at 65 other cases that are going to be investigated. What we've done, because now we are close to 120 cases, the DPCI already on the 1st of April this year, hired 34 retired detectives whose mandate is to work exclusively on TRC cases. So they're not having to try and do a TRC case in amongst terrorism and other very serious crimes that there is a high public interest in. They started work on the 1st of April. The NPA is matching them by getting approval to appoint retired senior members of the NPA who will also exclusively on a contract basis work full-time on these matters. And that will give us even greater capacity to look into these cases. At the end of the day, I don't think we can judge progress on what I say tonight. We need to just look at what has been accomplished with these cases and what results they produce. But there's definitely a commitment from both the NPA and from the DPCI to really give attention to these matters. I think that in the last 2 years, more has been done on TRC cases than since the start of the TRC. Before the TRC, there was the De Oliveira unit, which did exceptional work in the prosecution of Eugene de Kock, Wouter Besson, the Motherwell bombing, and other high-profile cases. And we are trying now to put as much resources as the state can permit to try and belatedly, and regrettably belatedly, do justice to these cases.
Now, it's been a year since he said that on the program. Have you seen any evidence of that movement he was talking about?
Vuyo, the two people that I referred to who deposed affidavits talking of political interference, Advocate Chris McAdam was one of them.
Yes.
He's the same person in 2003 that I approached with information around my uncle's death.
Yes.
So that was a public relations exercise at its best. And this is what they've become accustomed to. Covering up with lies.
2001. I've met him in 2001.
Now, let me just share this with you. In my view, based on my experiences, Vuyo, and correctly we need to focus on the NPA. You see, the NPA are just enforcers of protecting the deal. They're merely now opening few inquests. And what is going to transpire? In the Simelane, Craddock 4, Hefiji, Agate, Dipali matters, they expect us to be very content when the inquest verdict is reversed and we must walk away. I know in my own matter, in 2017, when I refused to walk away, I was under immense pressure on different fronts from comrades because I was not supposed to pursue the matter. And please help me understand. Here's a man who places himself on the crime scene and I'm not supposed to pursue him for getting answers. But let me take it further. When Chris McAdam made this public relations exercise here on national TV, a few days later, the FW de Klerk Foundation issued a press release. And President de Klerk spoke about an agreement and he condemned the NPA for pursuing this matter. Last year marked 50th anniversary of my uncle's gruesome death. And comrades were commemorating and celebrating his death. I refused to participate at the Roodepoort Cemetery and outside the Johannesburg Central Police Station. And I wrote a letter to the president of the ANC, Vuyo, and I asked him, how do you expect me to celebrate and commemorate the death of my uncle? Please share with me and the nation. When de Klerk talks about an agreement, you were part of the discussions with Rolf Meyer. What was discussed? And the president never responded. So what I'm saying is that they're giving us a few inquests to reopen. You see this, we have a history in this country. Towards the end of apartheid and in a new South Africa, you institute commissions of inquiry. Huge amounts of money get spent at the Sereti Commission, Yofa Commission, Marikana Commission. Is the Marikana Commission going to institute an investigation against a Lonman shareholder who sent the email? So they divert us into these commissions of inquiries. And then they stage these so that they give us one or two victims, you know, that must pay the price. This, in my view, comes back to the negotiations, comes back to the political settlement in this country, because out of that settlement came the Truth and Reconciliation Code. So we cannot have selective amnesia on these matters. And I intend pursuing and unpacking these matters in my latest book that, God willing, will come out during the course of the year. But I don't buy what politicians keep on lying to us for decades.
But Adam says that, well, resources were made available He was talking there about, a group or groups of people they've been able now to enlist who are going to solely focus on these cases. At least twice this year, Shamila Batoy came before the Portfolio Committee in Parliament and made the promise
We've had that before.
that they continue to pursue.
We have had that
Which then
before,
brings me to a question: is the legislature then doing its
Well, no
its
one
work?
cares. No one does anything. They are pursuing the cases because the Simelane family and the Craddock 4 took the policy directive of the then fourth administration to court and lost. Advocate Abrahams, before Shamila Batoy, announced the enrolling of the case of Nokuthula a day before the court judgment was to be made. Anyway, compelling them of the outcome of the TRC. When were those outcomes? Then he says, unfortunately, belatedly. So what can we talk about? And even this belatedly, in a year, he's only talking of 100 cases. Cases which were referred from the TRC for investigation and further prosecution were 400. 400. So in a year, in their own commitments of the 2 years, in 24 months, they've only been able to reignite. And by the way, Nokuthula's case, for example, a Timor case, they can't claim anything because we've done the work ourselves. The foundation paid for a private investigation in Nokuthula's case. They actually refused to prosecute even when we were donating that private investigation report to them. What happened? The main investigator passed as well. So which part shows commitment? Investigation? How many have they closed? You can't say we're looking into 100, 2 years down the line. You are looking. And most of this investigation are matters of desktop issues, by the way, Vuyo. So I don't buy the story that there was COVID, you couldn't go into a police headquarters and pick up the files. We found them ourselves. We found them ourselves. As families, we went and the Foundation for Human Rights to look for those. I've lost Nokuthula's docket twice. And we will reconstitute it ourselves and give it back to them.
Hanif, one of the other reasons he highlights in that little clip we played, Magadam, that is that these are not things that happened yesterday. So it takes time, to, gather the evidence and then, be able to put something like this before a court. Please unmute.
He has muted himself.
I beg your pardon.
Okay, it's fine now. It's fine now.
There's a massive contradiction. If this is what he's saying, we've just pointed out, Imtiaz has said that in 2018, he himself admitted that they were told in 2003 not to proceed with these matters.
Yes.
And he even says who said they mustn't proceed with these matters. And it was in a situation where he put it on affidavit.
Yes.
So he admits there was this kind of interference. Now, a lot of the work that has been done, for example, in the Timor inquest, for example, in the Simelane matter, are investigations that we had to raise funds to pay for. We have to raise funds to pay for counsel. And we got the state that who is trying to block us on every step of the way. If it was simply a case that they were taking a long time to, in fact, investigate these matters, why try and introduce a backdoor amnesty for the people who were the alleged perpetrators of these crimes? Why did we have to go to court? Then we had to go to court to block this backdoor amnesty. Where have we got after all these years? We get told through the report by the NPA to the Justice Portfolio Committee that there is a dedicated capacity. Now, who is in this dedicated capacity? Who is in charge of this new structure? We're told that the Deputy National Director, the Koch is. But he's head of National prosecuting services, how much time can he dedicate to this? How do they identify the cases? Tembi has mentioned 400 cases. How do they identify the cases which they're going to investigate and those they're not going to investigate? Who are the prosecutors? Who are the investigators? We've been asking them for meetings recently and we're not getting a response. So, you know, their bona fides are in question. You know, what they say and what they do are two different things.
In fact, to add to what you are saying, Lucanio Kalata was here, well, the last time we had a conversation on this matter. It was only after they, or when they were about to, or after, I can't remember exactly, file papers,
yes,
that they then, the Craddock 4 families got an audience with the NPA.
He's correct. In fact, as I said, jointly with the Craddock 4 widows, we went to court in 2007 to challenge the backyard policy on private prosecutions. We won, and that was strike off. We instituted on the family of Nokuthula, and there were delays. I was once told I must wait for the 2010 World Cup to finish because all resources of the state are focused on running a good World Cup. You're wasting our time. Wait a bit. We will see you. It's the same answers Lucanio amongst the Craddock 4 families, the Kalatas, got. And they also had to follow the same similar route of challenging a decision of non-prosecution. It was at the process where they filed that a decision was issued. The same with Nokuthula's case. When we had filed and actually had gone to court and the outcome was to be announced the following day, there was quickly a meeting called by Sean Abrahams with my representative legally, and we were called to the NPA, and I was told, wait a bit, tomorrow, and tomorrow in the morning they announced. And that is 2008. We are here today, 2022.
I want to play a clip from the inquest, just a short clip.
When I jumped up, I realized that Timbal wasn't there anymore. So I got up, looked through the window, and saw a body lying on the ground, far below, the building. Take off.
Sir, if I can ask you, I'm going to show you just a picture which is currently before the court as Exhibit C8. This is a black and white picture. So do you recognize that picture?
Yeah.
And can you explain to the court what is depicted on that picture?
What is
depicted? What is the picture of what is it?
Is 'n tafel met 3 stoele, gemerk A, B en C.
It's a table with 3 chairs marked A, B and C.
And I'm standing on the left side of the table.
Is that you standing there in the short pant safari suit on the left side of the table at the window?
Correct.
And the chairs are numbered A, B and C, is it correct?
That's correct, Heer Lagware.
Is this the room where this incident took place, which you have just described to the court?
This is the room.
Part of the reason that I will play something like that is that it raises quite a number of things, which in many ways have also, added to or raised, in fact, new conversations about this whole thing. From people who don't remember, these things, was it taken so much, or pretending not to remember, to things like people feeling sorry, for these people, no matter what they may have done in the past. And the more this, continues, the more this kind of tends to fade away, and people start looking at you as the loonies who are, why can't you just move on, and forget about this whole thing?
Let me just remind you and the nation that the only reason Rodriguez testified at the 2017 inquest was not because the NPA found him, was because his daughter made contact with me and handed him over to me. The NPA failed to find him.
Yes.
When they announced the reopening of the Timor inquest, they made no effort to find him. I failed to find him, but his daughter found him. So that's the first thing. Vuyo, when the inquest started, I still had the hope that surely, so many decades later, this man will speak the truth. He must speak the truth. He's going to his grave. We're all leaving this world. And what did he do? The same old apartheid mentality. And then I asked myself a question. They tell us about nation building. They talk to us about reconciliation. They say, no, we must forget the past and move on. How do we move on? Those sitting across the negotiating table all became politicians. They moved to the corridors of power. You ask the victims under democratic dispensation simply to forget. You give them a 30,000 rand payoff and said, no, now you must be content and the country must move on. It's something that's unacceptable. That's the first point. The second one, we talk about reopening of this inquest. Fuyo, how do you rehire apartheid-era prosecutors and investigating officers to investigate their own crimes? And an ANC-led government, Fuyo. It is mind-blowing. And then I'll give you a third example. You see, when I referred to the 50th anniversary celebration last year for my uncles, outside Johannesburg Central Police Station, the Kathrada Foundation hosted this event. They asked the Johannesburg Central Police Station permission 3 weeks prior to the event to host some sort of a function inside the police station. The police refused. The Minister of Justice stood outside the police station with a placard, posing for the cameras and smiling. Now I ask the question, who runs this country? Who runs this country? Who owns the economy, the land, the judicial system? And again, my question goes back to the political solution, the political agreement. What deals were made? And if the former president, few months prior to his death, can talk about an agreement, why is the ANC silent? Why do we need a commission of inquiry when the NPA can go to former Minister Bridget Mabandla, former President Thabo Mbeki, and say, we've got sworn affidavits against you. Can you kindly respond to it? Why do we need a commission of inquiry for that?
Or why do we even need to justify or over and over again tell people why this process is necessary? And I'm saying this on the back of, only this week, I can't remember his name, there was successful prosecution, in fact, sentencing of 100 years plus old perpetrator of Nazi crimes. And the world was, rejoicing, about why this was necessary, and anyone who can still be found must be brought to book.
Well, anyone who is born into a family, that family deserves every right to conduct its own ritual, to bid you farewell in their own custom. Every graveyard has a story. And there's never a family anywhere else in life that will refuse to move on. Anyway, life forces you to move on. You tidy your loved one the best way you know how. So you can go back tomorrow and say, here lie an elder sister of mine. If I believe that her spirit needs to protect me, I know I would have done the right thing. And I do believe that no one, under no circumstances, can tell me that I don't deserve to lay my sister the best way I know how. The same way I did with my father, the same way I did with my brother, the same way they will do to me, those who will be remaining when I'm supposed to be put off to rest. That's the right that I have. That's the integrity that she deserves. For now, her story is filled with betrayal. Comrades who betrayed her to her death, state which betrayed her to its own agreement, TRC which couldn't fulfill its own mandate, betrayed us, and today marked us as victims who are lunatics. Want to hold the country back When at the end of it all is the very same state that is paying for legal fees, and we are supporting and surviving on pro bono. The NPA doesn't have our interest at heart. We are still paying for waiting briefs now through pro bono funding, because we know that Mark Adam himself can't tell me who is going to prosecute on Noctula's case. When they told him not to prosecute, he agreed. Today, because I'm standing in court, he says I'm going to prosecute. Who will believe that? When did he investigate? What does he have to prosecute on our behalf? So that's the predicament we are facing. The legal representatives are killing it. And we are sitting here with no justice and with a labeling that now these ones are holding into the past. They don't want to let it go. No, it can't happen.
Quick last word from you, Hanif. What?
We are the people, the families, and the lawyers fighting for them are the people who are upholding the rule of law. We are the ones who say the law is very clear. These people refused to apply for amnesty. They did not get amnesty. The law said they should be prosecuted. What has the difficulty been in prosecuting them? What takes so long to prosecute people when you had files of documents with witnesses' statements, etc.? The result is that there is no justice for the families. The result is there is no closure for families, and this is because the state has been lax in its obligation to uphold the rule of law in terms of our constitution.
Okay, and that is where we are going to leave it. Let me thank all of you for coming through this evening, and perhaps it's important for our viewers to know two things. One is that Advocate McAdam has since retired, so he's no longer in the employ of the NPA, and I have been inviting the NPA since last week when I realized that it had been a year since we got a briefing about these matters. To date, we're still waiting for someone to come and update us about this very important matter. Apologies on the alcohol problem conversation we were supposed to have. We've moved that to tomorrow because we just wanted to talk more about what we have just spoken about. But before we go, let me tell you about something that happened in the British Parliament. The Minister of Tourism, Lindiwe Sisulu, says South Africa inherited common law from the British, and as such South Africa should decolonize it so that it accommodates the rights of everyone's rights, particularly the rights of indigenous Africans. This, of course, is after she was asked about the comments she made about the South African judiciary. We'll leave you with that clip of what she said in reply to MPs asking her about those comments. Have a good night.
South Africa is run on the basis of common law. Common law is British law, which we inherited. It's not common to me as an African. It's not common to the indigenous system that we say. Common law would have to ensure that it takes both the legal interpretation of the traditional system that was there and also that which we inherited. It hasn't, because it has to, somebody has to push it to make sure, or people have to push it to make sure that common law accommodates everybody's rights. The traditional side and the interpretation of the law and that which we call common law. We inherited common law with your support from yourselves. And sometimes it does not fit in our situation. And the Black Lawyers Association have on 2 occasions had conferences on how to decolonize the law. So it's a very common concern that they have, it's a very common concern that we have.